The initial swirl of the water, usually a comforting embrace, became a prelude to chaos. The muffled quiet of the depths was abruptly, horribly broken by the strangled, drowning screams of the SS officer. 90 seconds. The number echoed in my mind, a grim countdown. 90 seconds was all it took to extinguish a life, to fulfill my objective. My arms cinched tight around him, a brutal embrace. A swift check of my dive watch confirmed the agonizing passage of time. With a final, forceful push, his lifeless form was swallowed by the murky depths. The stark emergency lighting painted the scene as I propelled myself towards the hatchway, a critical point of entry. Every fiber of my being strained against the immense water pressure as I fought to turn the heavy wheel, the cold metal biting into my gloved hands. I knew armed soldiers lay in wait beyond the steel barrier, their vigilance my deadly adversary. My desperate hope hinged on the raw power of the ocean, that a sudden violent surge of water would slam into them, a disorienting force to level the playing field. The hatch groaned, then finally yielded, and a roaring wall of water, carrying me with it, erupted into the confined hall. 3 soldiers, their faces masks of shock and disbelief, scrambled to bring their rifles to bear, but the chaotic onslaught of the dark, deep water accomplished what I alone could not. Still holding my breath, lungs burning, I was tossed and turned by the powerful wave until I slammed against the outer hatch of the adjacent room. My hand shot out blindly, desperately seeking purchase, my fingers closing around the cold, familiar knurling of the wheel. With that tenuous grip and the crushing force of the water behind me, the heavy door shuddered and slammed shut with a resounding clang. In a frantic, adrenaline-fueled surge, I twisted the wheel, sealing the watertight hatch, a final, irreversible act that entombed the 4 enemy soldiers within their watery grave. I was aware that my well of chances and luck were more than likely depleted. Thus I concluded that the imposing exterior of the structure, the silent monolith against the dark water, was my only path on where to strike next. I was acutely aware that any damage I inflicted couldn't be so devastating as to leave me without a sanctuary in this hostile environment. Moving with a slow, deliberate purpose, I returned to my stowed cache of dive equipment. Donning each piece with practiced efficiency, I took a final, resolute breath and plunged back into the frigid embrace of the deep. Cargo hold C. The designation echoed in my mind, my waypoint, the location where I had stowed my vital torching gear. The journey through the black to the access hatch was a test of patience and nerve. Finally, I lumbered out into the relative openness of the bay, shedding unnecessary equipment and gathering the tools of my now destructive trade. From the fragmented intelligence I had gleaned, the Nazi intruders primarily occupied the interconnected levels ranging from 20 down to 11. My strategy was brutal yet necessary, severing the critical structural supports at level 20. The ensuing cascade of flooding, I hoped, would render levels 20 down to 1 uninhabitable, crippling their operation. Hours bled into the oppressive silence as I began the painstaking work. The hiss and whine of the underwater torch punctuated the darkness. Every so often, a prickle of unease would cause me to glance behind, half expecting some ancient, resurrected submersible to materialize from the gloom. Beforehand, I had taken a crucial precaution, tethering myself to a hatchway on level 23. It was a fragile lifeline, a desperate gamble that might offer a modicum of protection against the unknown forces, the violent vacuum, or the crushing implosion. Honestly, I couldn't be sure what awaited me. It was entirely possible the facility's automated integrity systems would slam shut the relevant seals, containing the damage and thwarting my ultimate goal. I meticulously scanned the imposing exterior of the structure, a silent, hulking leviathan looming in the oppressive darkness of the deep, mapping the remaining points of ingress. The grim calculus played out in my head again and again. Any structural damage I inflicted, however necessary, couldn't be so catastrophic to leave me exposed. Survival, even in the heart of the abyss, remained a paramount concern, moving with a slow, almost ritualistic deliberation, each movement weighted with the gravity of the remaining tasks ahead. With my strategy well underway in severing the critical load-bearing supports, the ensuing, uncontrolled cascade of flooding, I grimly calculated, I hoped would render the levels below uninhabitable, effectively crippling a significant portion of their operational capacity. The passage of time became a meaningless abstraction as I continued the painstaking and perilous work. The high-pitched whine and sputtering hiss of the underwater torch the only sound. Each bead of molten metal that peeled away from the support structure was a small step towards my uncertain goal. The psychological strain was almost as significant as the physical exertion. That primal instinct, that prickle of profound unease, still continued to compel me to cast a wary glance behind. That irrational fear still a constant companion. Utterly alone in the crushing, silent pressure, I finally reached the few remaining critical structural elements. A cold knot of apprehension tightened in my chest, a visceral reaction to the imminent and unpredictable consequences of my actions. Before initiating the final, irreversible act of severing the last support, I yanked on the crucial, yet fragile safeguard of the tether. It still seemed sturdy, and still attached to the hatchway on level 23. I just prayed its slender line connecting me to the lower levels would hold. It was a desperate contingency, a precarious lifeline that I hoped with all I had that it offered that modicum of protection against the unknown forces that my actions would unleash, the violent sucking vacuum of decompression, or the equally lethal crushing force of implosion. Honestly, the precise physical ramifications remained a terrifying unknown. With a final, fortifying inhalation, I deliberately engaged the trigger of the cutter. A faint, high-pitched hiss sliced through the water, a prelude to the violence about to unfold, then, quicker than conscious thought could process. A searingly bright, almost blinding blue-white arc erupted from the nozzle of the torch, momentarily illuminating the murky surroundings in stark relief. The intense heat radiated outwards, even through the thick layers of my suit. Sparks, incandescent motes, swirled in the water, dissipating almost instantly into the blackness. The metal groaned in protest, a deep guttural sound that vibrated through the water and into my very bones. A thin line of molten orange appeared at the point of contact, widening rapidly as the powerful cutting beam relentlessly ate through the structural support. The process felt slow, each fraction of an inch gained, a testament to the robust construction of the structure. My muscles screamed in protest against the awkward angle and the constant pressure of the water. Tiny bubbles, superheated water vapor, fizzed and popped around the cutting torch, momentarily obscuring my already limited visibility. Then, with a sudden wrenching shriek of stressed metal tearing apart, the severed support gave way. A deep, resonant thrum reverberated through the hull, a death knell echoing in the silent abyss. The massive structure, now compromised, shuddered violently, a wounded beast reacting to a mortal blow. A cascade of groaning and creaking sounds followed, the tortured cries of stressed bulkheads and twisted frameworks. Almost instantaneously, the water around me began to churn with a renewed ferocity. The initial trickle of displaced water from the severed support swelled into a powerful current, pulling and tugging at my body, threatening to rip me from my precarious tether. Debris, chunks of loosened metal, severed cables, and other unidentifiable fragments swirled chaotically in the turbulent flow, a dangerous ballet in the blackness. The pressure differential, the unseen force I had gambled on, began to assert itself with brutal efficiency. A low guttural roar, the sound of immense volumes of water rushing through breached compartments, filled the water. The current intensified dramatically, becoming a raging torrent that threatened to overwhelm my grip on the hatchway railing. My tether stretched taut, biting into my harness, the only thing preventing me from being swept away and crushed into the destructive maelstrom. I clung on with every ounce of strength I possessed, my body buffeted and slammed by the relentless force of the water and the flailing debris. The roar of the imploding levels grew louder, a terrifying symphony of destruction. I could feel the vibrations through the water, a deep, bone-jarring resonance that spoke of catastrophic structural failure. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the initial violent surge subsided, replaced by a powerful inward pull. The water around me seemed to be rushing upwards, drawn into the void I had created. My tether snapped taut again, this time resisting the pull of the imploding levels. The tension was immense, the thin line my only connection to relative safety. While trying to regulate my breathing, I fought to maintain my grip, my body a ragdoll caught in the chaotic interplay of opposing forces. The darkness was absolute, punctuated only by the occasional flash of dislodged electrical equipment, sparking and dying in the watery abyss. I shed the cumbersome weight of my dive gear, then navigated the settling chaos, hand over hand along the reassuring line of the tether. Finally, breaching the hatchway, I tore off my helmet and breathing apparatus, gasping for the blessedly clean air. As my head cleared, I surveyed the devastation. My desperate gamble appeared to have paid off. The facility's internal sensors blared warnings of catastrophic structural failure from levels 20 down to 1, while levels 21 to 100 remained stubbornly, ominously optimal. Stripped of my firearms, I was acutely vulnerable, a stark contrast to the heavily armed Nazi presence I knew lurked deeper within. Yet the imperative remained. I had to obliterate the time portal window they had so heinously conceived. A daunting task, considering my current precarious perch on level 23 and the heart of their operation residing in the facility's deepest, most fortified recesses. As I seized a much-needed moment to draw breath, a memory surfaced, unbidden, a poignant echo from a life I now felt impossibly distant from. I was perched on a wobbly stool in my sparsely furnished kitchen as I prepped for a deep-sea job, when a sharp knock echoed through the silence of my solitary existence. It startled me, the first potential visitor in what felt like an eternity of isolation. Opening the door, I was confronted by a face etched with time and hardship. Jason, a fellow saturation diver, a bond forged in the claustrophobic confines of a diving bell weeks at a time, a crucible that either forged unbreakable friendships or bitter animosities. He offered a strained smile, a transparent attempt at cheerfulness, but the weight of some unseen burden hung heavy in his eyes. I ushered him in, the unspoken understanding between seasoned divers, a silent invitation. He rattled through the usual polite formalities, grabbed a couple of beers from the fridge, and we settled onto the porch, the humid air thick with unspoken anxieties. Jason was one of the good ones, a soul too pure for the harsh realities of the world, a quality that often left him susceptible to exploitation. He spoke of the unraveling tapestry of his marriage, the raw threads of turmoil exposed. Finally, the dam broke, and he confided his desperate desire for divorce, the words tumbling out in a torrent of pain, detailing the emotional abuse he and his young son had endured. I was hardly a sage on the subject, my own failed marriage a stark testament to that. As the night deepened and the beer dwindled, my advice was simple, born of hard-won experience. Do what is unequivocally best for yourself, and above all, for your son. That path, however difficult, would never lead to the crushing weight of regret. That porch, under the cloak of a starless sky, would be the last time I ever saw Jason alive. A year crawled by, marked by the relentless rhythm of deep-sea work, before the chilling tendrils of news reached me, painting a horrifying picture of his final days. Returning from a grueling job, Jason had finally confronted his wife, the word divorce hanging heavy in the air. His brother later recounted the wife's venomous response, a chilling threat to fabricate a monstrous lie to the police, accusing him of molesting his own son. Jason, perhaps initially dismissing it as a cruel bluff, a tactic born of desperation, couldn't fathom the depravity. But she did it. She called the police, weaving a vile tapestry of falsehoods, intent on destroying him. Jason, reeling from the gut-wrenching accusation, the prospect of wrongful arrest for such an unspeakable crime, fled his home. The subsequent hours remained shrouded in a painful uncertainty, a confluence of factors, the lingering exhaustion of the job, the shock of the false accusation that pushed him beyond the breaking point. Jason, my friend, drove his car to an empty, desolate parking lot and ended his own life with a single fatal shot. The police, arriving at his home oblivious to the tragedy unfolding, were met with the wife's tearful confession, the chilling admission of her fabricated accusations. Hours later, they discovered Jason's body, the news a cruel echo reaching the woman whose vindictive lie had set in motion a catastrophic chain of events, culminating in the irreversible loss of a good man. Jason's body was cremated the following day in Texas, a sterile finality. A month later, I stood in the forced solemnity of his hometown mass, the hollow facade of a wake. And all I could fixate on was his wretched wife, positioned prominently at the front of that damned church, clutching their son, flawlessly enacting the role of the grieving widow. The gnawing guilt, the sharp sting of inaction, the phantom weight of what could have been done. I shoved it all aside with a brutal act of self-preservation, a necessary severing to maintain focus in the face of the looming threat. I locked the pain down, deep within the ironclad vaults of my mind, bolting the heavy doors against the insidious whispers of regret. Now, the indelible memory of those I loved, the faces of those I had failed to protect, and the unwavering image of those I still desperately fought for, ignited a cold, furious fire within me, a molten core of resolve that burned away doubt and hesitation. A storm was gathering in the depths, a tempest of my making, and I was the inevitable cresting wave, poised to crash down with relentless, unforgiving force upon the unsuspecting enemy. Long ago, amidst the crushing pressures and the ever-present specter of the deep, I had made my peace with death. In my perilous line of work, where the slightest miscalculation could be fatal, an overabundance of caution, a paralyzing fear for limb and life, could become a self-fulfilling prophecy, a frantic, counterproductive chase after the very demons of worry that haunted the edges of our consciousness. We called it the dragon chasing its tail, a futile, consuming cycle of anxiety that often led to the very errors we sought to avoid. I had learned to embrace the calculated risk, to dance on the razor's edge with a grim acceptance of the potential consequences. And now, with the odds stacked precariously against me, a solitary figure against an entrenched enemy, with treacherous, water-filled levels separating me from the heart of their insidious operation, I began my arduous trudge into the oppressive darkness. Each movement was a testament to sheer will, a stubborn refusal to yield to the exhaustion that clawed at my limbs and the chilling uncertainty that gnawed at my spirit. I pressed onward towards what unknown horrors awaited in the crushing blackness of the deepest levels, what grotesque secrets lay hidden within the Nazis' underwater stronghold, what unimaginable dangers I would have to confront to finally extinguish their unholy ambitions. The path ahead was shrouded in shadow, but the burning memory of lost friends and the unwavering hope for a future free from their temporal meddling served as my only guiding light in the abyssal gloom. And when the echoes fade and silence starts to bloom, shattered vows lie scattered, adrift, a broken and brittle, but still I give. This truth I swear, though shadows twist and loom. This fragile hope, defying bitter, defying doom. Though doubt has clawed and fear has made me bend, still to this I vow, for my weary spirit lend. To this I hope, my fractured heart never to ascend. If not for miles that keep our spirits far, you are the balm upon each aching scar. And that endless absence would no longer mar. Courage lies dormant, a banner yet unfurled, honor's true path, in silence still uncurled. For every step my yearning soul has whirled. Amidst the chaos, the wreckage and the fray, still through the darkness, I desperately stray. For you, my nautical Mary, through the foam, my compass spins and always leads me home. For you, the essence that my being craves, because it's you. The mystery of the oceans I crave. Caleb Vance. Ah, that me. Salt-etched and sea-defined. A tin can sailor now. Out of time.